Hello and welcome back. Our next session speaks to how agility and innovation are enabled in a skills-based strategy. We'll provide practical research insights to get your skills strategy moving. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Burnett, Research Principal of the Human Capital Center of the Conference Board, who will introduce her panel and moderate questions from the audience. Welcome, Jennifer. So great you could be here.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm very excited to be here with you today, and I am joined by Joost Heins, who is from Randstad, our Global Head of Strategic Intelligence, and then also Lyle Yorks, who is both a Distinguished Principal Research Fellow for the Conference Board as well as Professor at Columbia University. So thank you both for joining us today. So I've had the opportunity to listen into some of the other sessions today, and I would say this is probably a good way for us to kick off the information that we're going to share with you today, because skills really have taken on a new meaning and purpose from a human capital perspective, and they are not sort of the same skills that we have used from when we think of KSAs or even competencies. Because as you can tell from some of the other wonderful sessions today, skills truly has become a common data element that we're using to not only link talent practices together, but that they are also used to really reach beyond the boundaries of jobs, linking roles, people, learning careers, and even each other, and are really enabled by the very advanced AI and machine learning technology that is being used to really for us to use these tools, but also that it's a challenge, that this is a complex shift that organizations are embracing, and very much a focus on change and a close look at how using skills really reflects the culture and how you think about your workers. So I think what we're going to be sharing with you today touches on all of those things. So we have two very compelling research studies to share with you. First, Joost is going to share some great work that they've done at Randstad that really focuses on what skills are in demand today, and how to think about those skills and how to prepare for that need for those skills going forward. And then Lyle will share some research that we've done at the Conference Board that looks a little bit more about how organizations are making that change, where they're starting, and some of the challenges that they're having. So Joost, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I wanted to start with what a great week to have this topic on the agenda. I think hopefully a lot of you have already seen it, but the launch of the ChatGPT is probably the biggest amplifier of skills we've seen in maybe more than a decade. For those that are not aware about ChatGPT, it's a chatbot that can code for you. It can debug your codes. I've actually used it this week to also plan my 5-year-old his birthday party, because it gives you ideas of what you can do and everything. So it's absolutely amazing. So great to have this topic on the agenda, and I'm happy to share the research we did. So I think first of all, so why skills, right? I think the biggest important thing about skills is that it's actually closer to who we are as humans. Back in the day, we would talk about job titles, and we would talk about an occupation. Somebody was a lawyer or they were an accountant, but you see that this is changing now. And there are accountants that can code. So does that make them a software developer? Does that make them an accountant? It doesn't really fit anymore. And I think that's where the skills come in very handy. And we looked at those skills and the ones that are most in demand, and we looked at 26 markets. So it's a very extensive research that we've done to look at what do we see happening around the most in-demand skills across the globe in those 26 countries. And the first thing that we noticed when we looked at these skill clusters is that there are a lot of skills that are underneath that, of course. We talk about AI, ML, for example, but there are lots of skills underneath that are maybe easier to acquire than the whole skill cluster at once. Another thing that we've noticed, which was very interesting to see, is that the combination of what we would often call hard skills, like learning Python, for example, is combined with a lot of soft skills. So it seems like the market is more and more aware of having the combination of skills that makes it unique and really makes a difference for the different companies. A couple of things that we see there is that those soft skills are very much in demand as well, often in combination with those harder skills. Also, probably interesting to note maybe is that soft skills is not the right term, right? Because soft skills are sometimes harder to acquire than some of those hard skills. So what are really hard and soft skills? But you can think of like communication, teamwork, problem solving. You see that for a lot of the skills that we've looked at, these are really rapidly increasing demand compared to last year. Then what are those skills that we looked at? I think probably important to know is, and that's not going to be a surprise, is that if we look at our top 10 most in-demand skills, you see a lot of digital skills there, and that's for a reason. We see the whole world digitizing. Every company is working on that. But at the same time, you see some of those skills that if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would customer service still be very much in demand? I would say, well, a lot of that will be automated, et cetera, et cetera. But we still see a very strong demand for customer service and actually being a very difficult role to recruit. Also, interesting to note, if you look at these top 10 skills, I think it's interesting to see that if you think of a typical company, they will probably need all 10 of that. And that is always good to realize. I think most people are aware. But if you were a traditional bank, you're not competing with your traditional competitors anymore, but you're competing with everybody to acquire these skills from the market. So that's, I think, something to always be aware of when you look for these skills. Just very important to keep that in mind when you try to acquire these skills. Of course, it's not just that you're looking for a skill. There's so many things that are related to those skills, and that's what we looked into as well. We've compared on different metrics how the dynamics work in those different markets, for example, around compensation, but also how competitive is that market. So if you look at, for example, AI and ML, you see that 20% of the jobs are currently going unfilled. So there's a huge gap between the supply and demand for these skills. Now, not every country is the same, and even if you would drill down on city level, you'll see that there are quite some differences in different locations for the different skills. And I think that's the point that is good to be aware of, is that sometimes it might be really hard to look for a skill in a certain location, but it's easier in another location. So how do you decide on where you put a certain software hub, as an example? I think back in the day, if you would ask a company, why did you open in a certain city or a certain location, then talent might have not always been in the top 5. But I think for this day and age, since we deal with a lot of talent scarcity, which even when a recession hits is most likely not likely to go away, it is important to keep that in mind. Of course, cost and availability not the only thing. I think, luckily, majority of the companies are very well aware of how to have a better balance in their workforce. As an example, between male and females. And if you look at the digital specifically, you see that a lot of the skills have an underrepresentation of women. I think that's something to also be very much aware of, and what can we do as that in this world to make sure that we have a better representation. Here you see the examples, difference by company. Romania sticks out that we're actually the majority of the business intelligence and data visualization people are female. But if you would look at like app development, on average, that's only 15%. So I think that's a good assignment for us all to see and how we can increase the female representation in that group. Um, Overall, I think what we did, and you're welcome to download the full research on our website, is to show really for those skills on what are the different elements that you need to think about, and have you start that conversation internally in your company to say, okay, are we aware of how tricky it is to fill these roles? And if we want to fill these roles, because often they're critical for a company strategy, how are we going to go about that? And of course, not only look at the people that you want to hire, but also look at your own talent. And I hope that is a good segue for Jennifer and Lyle to share their research.
Great, thank you, Joost. I think that this is so important today. We certainly continue to hear organizations struggling with filling roles with the skill sets that they're looking for, and of course a lot of creative ways that organizations are trying to do that. So knowing what those skills are that are in high demand, basically who they're competing against for those same skills is so important. But as you said too, being able to see inward and to look to see if perhaps you have those skills in your own workforce is another way to go about it.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, Lyle, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about the research that we've done at the conference board.
Hey, thank you. I assume you can hear me okay. So that I want to look at what's really some of the processes that one has to be aware of in order to start to make this move towards a skills-based organization and get the agility. And in the research that we did, which basically involved a series of focus groups with a total of 45 leaders from human capital, talent management, learning and development, strategic workforce planning that actually participated in those focus groups. And we used those to really put together a survey that went out again to a group of leaders, and we had 139 respondents from 17 different industries, and that's the basis for the report. And I want to look at what are some of the major processes that emerged from that research that we did, and looking at that. And what emerged were, among other things, 5 insights for what's ahead. And you can see them emerging here, and we're going to look at each of these are basically a process you need to be thinking about as you start to make that move going forward to becoming a skills-focused organization. And you will also have a copy of these PowerPoints, so you'll have those available to you. And the first one of those insights was organizations are actually making this transformation to skills-based human capital practices. HR leaders have a high interest in moving to a skills-driven approach, but are not quite sure how. And you can see there the percentage of survey responders in the early stages of preparing or just starting to use skills-based, solutions. So it's really in the early stages going forward over the past couple of years. But there were only 6% that were not really considering using or making this sort of change at this stage. The transformation to skills involves a significant shift in culture and mindset about talent. And this, in fact, was probably one of the most important things that emerged through the research, because a lot of the organizations, when they first started playing with this, they suddenly started to realize how important that mindset was, and they weren't really thinking about it when it began. And the HR leaders who have started this transformation, they quickly realized the complex and far-reaching impact on culture and operating models. This is not just an HR-related shift. It's a change that's taking place across the entire organization and the culture of the entire organization and the different cultures and the functions. 92% of survey responders agreed or strongly agreed that this shift requires a change in culture and mindset. And they also found that this was one of the most critical factors to take into account. And that said, business priorities are what's really driving this shift. HR leaders see this as a business imperative. survey respondents noted that the top benefits were greater talent agility, improved transparency to available internet workforce skills, and ability to find, keep, and grow talent. So the need increasingly, particularly in this world where things are changing quickly and things are emerging way faster than was the past, this was the business priority that's taking place. This is not an HR need. This is a business priority. And opportunity exists then to expand how organizations are using this skill-based approach and where they realize the most value. Most of the ones in the research we did are using skills-based solutions for learning, career development, and talent acquisition recruiting. That's where the majority of applications are as a starting point, certainly to begin. Areas of application with the highest perceived value also include career mobility, strategic workforce planning, and succession. This approach and this change in mindset really provides opportunities for addressing increasing needs for meeting the fact that people want more, career mobility going forward. However, that said, organizations face barriers and challenges to be able to really progress in this area. The HR leaders reported that the transformation to a skills-based human capital strategy is complex and requires a focus on change management to overcome obstacles. It was common to start with one talent process and then build on that success going forward. So starting in one place, and as we said in a previous slide, for example, it might be learning and development or talent acquisition, because there's a number of real, barriers that have to be met, including outdated data, lack of, resources, and the whole complexity of the technology. You can see this list when you look at the PowerPoints. Those barriers have to be planned for, and they have to be addressed. So if we look at the implications for future research practice, there are several. One is being able to attract and hire based on core critical skills and capabilities, which provides more opportunity, among other things, for underrepresented groups and increase the diversity of talent, which is an issue actually that our predecessor said here. Be able to really offer opportunities to learn additional skills once on the job to people. So when people come, that of course connects to, career mobility. Implement the various talent practices that can evaluate employee skills to support continuous development. That's important, making that sort of happen. And having to leverage corporate digital transformation and automation initiatives. And then I think if you just sort of look at those first four, bullet points, you start to see the complexity of the process when you think about how those things would interact. You have to align your learning development opportunities with current and changing business critical skill sets needed to across the organization and even across industries. So starting to look at how you need to be aligning your learning and development practices and provide short-term projects and gigs that really benefit the organization, as well as provide for people having developmental opportunities, putting that into place. And use a skill-based, data-informed approach to gain insights about and transparency to skills and capabilities of the current workforce and create a targeted plan to address what gaps exist with regard to future skill needs. And that's another piece that can actually be accelerated through the use of machine learning and AI. It really provides opportunities for, doing that. And again, shows how you can start to really improve the agility that you have in terms of utilizing human capital. And of course, you've got to create a common language about workforce capabilities, because they are no longer just linked to particular functions or particular roles. And now the focus is looking at how it happens across that. So with that, that's sort of a quick overview of what the processes are. But I think one of the things certainly to be thinking about strategically, if you're human capital leader or a talent management leader in an organization is how are we going to put in place approaches to begin meeting each of those 5 insights in terms of what's already has emerged from those organizations that have taken the initiative in terms of moving in this direction. That I can turn it back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Lyle. Very interesting results in both studies. I think that this is really informs into what we should be thinking about in terms of skills, and then how that approach is being carried out in many organizations. We do have time for questions, just a few minutes. So if anyone would like to put a question in the Q&A, we're happy to answer that for you. While we're waiting, Joost, I thought I would ask you a question. If you could share an example of how organizations are using the data that you all produce, that is in the report, how they're utilizing that information to really get a better view of that supply and demand.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think a lot of organizations are using it at different levels. It can be at the level of the hiring manager to really understand how tight is that market and what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we fill a certain position. But it can also be in a more strategic level to say, okay, if we want to have attainable strategic goals, we need to make sure that we have access to these skills, because without these skills, our digitalization of our infrastructure or our client connects that are moving online will not be realized. And that makes it more strategic in nature to make sure, okay, what do we need to know about talent and the availability to actually make sure that you have access to that. And I think it helps, it's the foundation to come up with the right talent strategy around internal mobility and buy-build conversations, basically, to think about, okay, how am I making sure that we are going to have these skills in our company to reach the goals that we want to do.
Right, which really underlies the title of our session today, because I think this information from both studies shows, just as you're saying, Joost and Lyle, for some of the things you touched on as well, is organizations are at different points in this process, in this journey. And it does tend to be more the organizations who are experiencing high change in their environment, who want to make sure that they're staying ahead of what those skills are and don't fall behind and have gaps that would really directly impact their competitiveness in the market. So those organizations who have realized that agility and innovation are really the core of their business seem to be stepping out earlier than some others in order to have that flexibility when they think about their workforce, their current workforce, and especially that future workforce they'll need to achieve those goals. We do have a question. What would be an example of a company that is far ahead in terms of shifting to a skills-based approach? And Joost or Lyle, would you like to answer that one?
Well, I'm just trying to think who we can reveal on that one, Jennifer. Does anything pop into your mind?
Well, I do know that, from our focus groups in particular, we found, sort of consistent with what I was just sharing, that organizations who are technology organizations who may already have been organized in less of a very sort of structured type of organizational design, who have that flexibility with moving their employees around in terms of different roles and assignments, tended to be a little bit further down this road than others.
Yeah, that's what comes to my mind, particularly the technology-based. Yes.
Joost, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, maybe the Walmart announced, I think last month, that they are going to really work on the infrastructure underneath. I think a good skills taxonomy underneath is very important, and they have announced that they have quite an ambitious agenda to really map the skills of their of at least 2 million of their employees. And I think that is a very good approach. But in general, I would say, and don't feel bad if your company is not that far ahead yet. Every company is struggling with this, but I do think it can be a game changer if you have it organized well.
Great. Thank you.
And I think we've seen some great examples today of those that are far ahead. You know, the Novartis, MetLife, Dell. In addition, I think you see companies like IBM who've been in this space for some time who've really developed, you know, pretty developed taxonomy. So there's a fair amount out there. And I think the researchers like you all have done a great job in sort of saying, well, where is this state of the art and where is it going?
Yes.
So I want to thank you all very much for being on today, and we'll definitely stay in touch. And I think looking forward to the research project you're doing next year on this, right, Jennifer?
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you all. Appreciate your time today, and we'll definitely stay in touch on all this.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.